The same thing that makes them uncomfortable with ending a baby's life at 34 weeks should make them uncomfortable with ending a baby's life at 8 weeks, because those babies are equally as valuable. So, and if they're only happening for quote unquote emergency situations, then why would Massachusetts have even needed to change their law?
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Ever Living podcast. We are sponsored by New Hampshire Right-to-Life, and we are your life-loving hosts, Cindy,
Jason,
and Jessica.
Welcome. Oh,
yes, welcome back. And today we have a wonderful guest back here on the show. She's been here before, but we have Dr. Christina Francis. She's the CEO of AAPLOG. We're really happy to have you here. Welcome.
Thanks so much. It's great to be back with you guys.
Yeah,
and for those who aren't aware, AAPLOG is American Association of Pro-Life OB-GYNs.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes. Well, great. Well, I know we had you on the show a few months ago kind of to talk about just a little bit about what AAPLOG does. So I'd recommend, if anybody didn't watch that episode, go back and watch that first. And then, but we're going to talk about some other new things today. So yeah, but Dr. Francis, how have you been?
Good. Staying very busy, of course. And, there's a lot going on, as you all know, on the life issue. And, unfortunately, even just this week, with Massachusetts, a state near to you all, passing or signing into law this horrific law allowing for abortion up until the moment of birth. In full honesty, I think this week was feeling a little bit discouraged, as I'm sure many people in the movement have been. But I also am reminded through some of the things that I've been talking about in interviews about that Massachusetts law, and just, stuff I'm seeing online. I've been encouraged by the fact that I do think some of these extreme laws are highlighting for people really the atrocities of abortion and what it really truly is, in maybe a way that they wouldn't have seen in another way. And so I'm trying to draw encouragement from that in the midst of kind of a dark week, I think. But yeah, I think we should all just be encouraged that this fight is still obviously worth fighting. And we just need, I think, renewed commitment to ensuring that we are getting the truth out there and into the hands, especially of women and families that are in vulnerable or crisis situations, that they can understand that abortion is not a good answer for them, that there are other things that can be done to help support them. So trying to draw encouragement from that kind of in the midst of a tough week, and seeing that law passed, and definitely very frustrating. So, yeah.
I will agree with you that I think that in some ways that this happening in Massachusetts is opening people's eyes to how extreme these abortion laws are. Because I had a conversation with my dad yesterday. He gave me a call because he knows I'm involved in pro-life work, and he's a strong pro-life advocate. And he called me, and he obviously was really upset about Massachusetts law. But I said to him, I was like, Dad, you know that Massachusetts is joining like 10 other states, right, or 9 other states that have laws already for late-term abortion. And he was like, oh no, I thought Massachusetts was the first one. He's like, I wonder why, this is the one that's blowing up on the internet. Yeah. Everyone's like talking about this. So, I mean, obviously, as terrible as it is, at least I think there's definitely been a lot of awareness of the fact that this happened, right, and everyday people are finding out about it. And I was able to share him, like, no, other Maine has a law like this, Vermont, right, Maryland, like the list, Washington, D.C., the list goes on, so, yeah. So I think, just as you said, I think it's at least opening people's eyes to how extreme these laws are.
Absolutely.
Well, and I think it also paints a contrast between the pro-life side, where we're saying, hey, let's just respect the other human being in this picture, mm-hmm, and the pro-abortion side, which their goal seems to be, as far as I can tell, abortion legalized through all 9 months, taxpayer funded, and absolutely no restrictions. And I think that falls outside, I think, of even where most people would consider themselves pro-choice would fall.
Right, exactly. Well, it's been really interesting to me to hear some of the discussion going on around it. I did an interview on it yesterday, and they highlighted a segment from Kamala Harris back during the 2024 election cycle, where she said, "Oh, come on, it's ridiculous. No one is doing abortions in the third
Yeah.
trimester for elective reasons, or for non-emergency reasons, or whatever." And so and I've heard that echoed by a lot of other, pro-abortion advocates. But in the same breath, if that's the case, then why did Massachusetts need to change their law? I mean, they allowed for ending a pregnancy beyond 24 weeks if a woman's life was in danger, or even for mental health, which, we all know essentially just opens up the door for an abortion essentially for any reason. But that was already there. So if they're not really happening, and if they're only happening for quote unquote emergency situations, then why would Massachusetts have even needed to change their law? But yet, when they're really pushed on it, they still are trying to minimize the fact that they're really opening the door intentionally for elective abortions at any point in pregnancy. And I think, to your point, Jason, they're doing that because they know that message doesn't resonate with the vast majority of the American public, that people don't want to see babies' lives ended at that stage of pregnancy. Of course, our job, our mission as a movement is to help people understand that the same thing that makes them uncomfortable with ending a baby's life at 34 weeks should make them uncomfortable with ending a baby's life at 8 weeks, because those babies are equally as valuable. So, I think we just continue to do that, point to, okay, why are you uncomfortable with a baby's life being ended at 34 weeks? What makes you uncomfortable about that? And then sort of walk that back to, okay, well, the same kind of things apply to a baby at 8 weeks. And so let's talk about why that does or does not make you uncomfortable. So, my hope and prayer is that this awful law in Massachusetts and as you said, for some reason it's getting a lot more traction than maybe when these laws passed in other states. My hope is that it will actually open the door for us to be able to start having some of these kinds of conversations.
And does this like up to birth abortion law, how does it affect the OB-GYNs now in Massachusetts?
Well, I think that's a really good question. And I think it's an unknown at this point. I mean, it does sort of raise the question of, is there then going to be a lack of conscience protections if it's, said that women should have a quote unquote right to this, and it just requires one doctor signing off? What if there's not a doctor in that area who's willing to sign off on this? Is this a situation then where the state is going to try to pressure physicians to do that? I don't know. I think that remains to be seen. And I think that's a maybe unintended consequence. Maybe it's not unintended. I don't know. But perhaps an unintended consequence of some of these laws that get passed is that, whenever you grant a right to someone else has a corresponding duty then to provide whatever it is that right is. And in this situation, that person who has that corresponding duty becomes the physician. And so, that's certainly something that we watch very closely with laws like this. And I know we were going to talk at some point, maybe this is a good point to talk about it, but about AAPLOG Action. We started a 501c4 a couple of years ago in response to these constitutional amendments that states were passing, because we recognize that doctors' voices matter, and doctors needed to have a voice in these fights to say, this is not healthcare, it's not good for our patients. And, because of lobbying laws and things like that for nonprofits, then we needed a 501c4. So we started AAPLOG Action. And one of the big sort of policy areas that we focus on at AAPLOG Action is conscience protection. So for those of us who are in practice, but also for medical trainees who are under significant pressure and coercion now in their training programs to perform or assist in abortions. And so that's a big area that we are always watching out for. And, pro-life medical students are being really kind of systematically weeded out of OB-GYN. They're being told when they go for residency interviews that if you're pro-life, you might as well not do OB-GYN, which of course is ridiculous because 93% of OBs don't do abortions, but that's not being communicated to these students as they're contemplating their specialty choice. And so that's a big area that we're focused on right now, is really seeking to protect conscience rights and to strengthen the enforcement of federal conscience protections, which actually are pretty robust, actually. They just need to be enforced. And so thankfully we have people in HHS right now who are very committed to enforcing conscience protections. In the past, we've had administrations that wouldn't enforce them, but our position is we've got these conscience protections for a reason, and they really do need to be enforced.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
And do you find like a strong AAPLOG membership in states like Massachusetts, Vermont, California? Like, are there doctors seeking to join AAPLOG in those states?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have members in all 50 states, including in Massachusetts and New Hampshire. And many of them are not listed publicly on our website because of fear of professional repercussions if they list themselves publicly, or they don't want to be doxxed by activist patients or something like that. So it's certainly understandable. We definitely need more doctors to be representative of AAPLOG in states that have very permissive abortion laws. But I think it's very telling that even though all the OB-GYNs in the country certainly are not members of AAPLOG, still the vast majority of them are not doing abortions. And so our goal at AAPLOG is to really get the medical evidence into the hands of physicians to say, you should critically evaluate this evidence and look at what abortion does to our patients, not just our preborn patients, but our maternal patients as well. And then, make a decision. If you don't oppose abortion on moral grounds, you really should oppose it just simply on the fact that it harms our patients, and so we're really trying to get the message out there. And I think that we really are kind of the silent majority in medicine. I think most doctors actually really don't feel comfortable with abortion. They might see it as something that, okay, patients need access to this for whatever social reason, but many, many physicians really don't feel comfortable with it. And I think it's because deep down they understand that it completely goes against the entire purpose of medicine to intentionally end the life of one of our patients.
Mm-hmm.
Have you met OBs who, because I've seen there's those two studies that the vast majority of OBs do not do any abortions,
Right.
and that just, I feel like if you look at ACOG, which is the larger OB organization, they're super pro-abortion. They're even like anti-pregnancy center. Like, we don't even want to help pregnant women get the resources they need to succeed.
Yeah.
I guess I just grapple with that. It's like, how can both of those be true? Like, 90% ish of OBs will not do any abortions, but yet they'll say on paper, or they'll lend some credence to it. Or New
Yeah.
Hampshire's largest medical provider, Dartmouth, they're super. They're always in the legislature advocating for abortion till birth.
Right. Absolutely. Well, so, again, I think it's not that 93% of OB-GYNs would say that they're pro-life. It's just that 93% of them don't do abortion. So I think the bigger question is, okay, if they're pro-choice, if they, count themselves as pro-choice, and abortion is, especially a first trimester abortion, from a technical standpoint, is actually a relatively simple procedure. We're all trained in the procedure of how to do it. I, of course, only do a DNC for a miscarriage, not for an abortion, but we all have the technical training to do that. So why do they choose not to do it? Well, I think it's because somewhere deep down they're uncomfortable with it. They don't want to do it. They don't have any desire to do that. But because of that, I think, a lot of them will still refer for abortions, but also because abortion is not an integral part of their practice. Honestly, they don't really pay that much attention to what ACOG is saying related to abortion. You know, as OB-GYNs, especially now, the amount of medical information and knowledge that we have to consume and retain as physicians now, like compared to 50 years ago, is kind of insane, actually. You know, it's why medicine has become so subspecialized, actually, because, you know, the days of being able to know everything about a very broad area of specialty are over, really. And so people have become very subspecialized. And I say that to say that, you know, physicians are busy. And so if ACOG is putting out stuff about something that you envision as a physician has absolutely nothing to do with your practice, you've got enough other stuff to consume. So you're just ignoring that. And so I think it actually is a situation where a lot of OB-GYNs actually don't know how radical ACOG is on this issue. They don't go with what their membership says on this issue. It is a leadership down, you know, top down imposition and decision. We have an active member of AAPLOG, Dr. Hector Chapa, who's in Texas, who is well known and respected within the OB-GYN community, was on the ACOG board, really thought that he was going to be able to make a difference at ACOG, and left the board because the board refused to talk about anything other than abortion, essentially. And he just got so frustrated with, I'm not here to talk. He wasn't even asking them necessarily to change their position, even though obviously that would have been his wish. His wish was just, can we please address something else? There are so many other issues that we should be addressing as an organization, and they refused. And so he left the board because he just was so frustrated over that. So it really is a leadership down push, and they don't listen to their membership. And I think so many OBs are just actually so busy that it's kind of like their head is in the sand about this issue. And they don't truly realize, because when I've pointed it out, even to some of my pro-choice colleagues, they've never even seen some of these statements from ACOG that are so ridiculous, you know? And so I think it's just honestly that a lot of people just don't realize.
How does AAPLOG connect with OB-GYNs across the country? Is it word of mouth? Are you reaching out to them individually? How does that work?
Yeah, it's kind of a multifaceted approach. It's, you know, it's again, because physicians are busy, it's hard to get their attention. It's hard to get in front of them. So a lot of our new members come by word of mouth. I think referral from a friend or a colleague carries the most weight as far as, you know, we're kind of seen as being an alternative to ACOG, although we have members who are members of both. So it's not like people have to leave ACOG to become an AAPLOG member. But I think because of that, sometimes people are skeptical or wonder, you know, who we are, that sort of thing. So referral from a friend or a colleague, I think carries the most weight. We go to conferences wherever we can. Now, ACOG has kicked us out of all of their conferences, not because we were troublemakers, but because we're pro-life. And they said that doesn't go well with ACOG's positions and their values. And so we're not allowed to exhibit at any of their conferences anymore, even though we did for years and years. The American College of Nurse Midwives similarly has kicked us out of all of their conferences for the very same reason.
I'm just curious,
Wow.
when did that happen? Like, when did you start getting kicked out of conferences?
We got kicked out of ACOG conferences basically on my first day as CEO. What a way to start out as CEO. So that was back in 2023. I was actually in the DC area, ready to set up our exhibit booth at their conference the next day when we got a notification that our booth had been canceled. And after much back and forth and them not responding to us, we leaked the story to the media, and then the media went to them, and then they told the media that they had kicked us out because we were pro-life. So, and we have not been allowed back in. We've tried to get back in since then, and they deny our request to have an exhibit booth. And then with the American College of Nurse Midwives, I feel like it was around the same time. Actually, no, that one happened before, because it was before I took over as CEO. So that one was probably like in 2022 when we tried again this year. You know, a few years had passed. I said, let's try again and just see if they'll let us back in. And so we did, and they said no. Interestingly, one of our midwives submitted a talk proposal on abortion pill reversal. and it was accepted. And we were kind of shocked, actually, but we were like, this is great. We could go and we can talk about the evidence behind abortion pill reversal. And it was going to be myself and then two of our midwives doing a panel on it. And then the midwife that had submitted the talk proposal got an email and said, oh, we actually thought that your talk was going to be going against abortion pill reversal, and we were just informed that it's not. So we're going to rescind our offer for you to come and give your talk. So
Talk about discrimination.
And this is an academic conference. It's supposed to be an academic conference for continuing education. One of the tenets of continuing education is supposed to be that balanced information is presented, that if there is conflicting evidence on a topic, that both sides of the evidence be presented, and then the merits, of each side be discussed, and the drawbacks of each side, all of that. So they are intentionally only allowing one side of the medical evidence to be presented. So that was really, and it was in response to activist midwives within the organization essentially crying about the fact that they were going to have a talk on abortion pill reversal, and they came out with this virtue signaling apology message of, we're so sorry that we even contemplated having them. I mean, really, really ridiculous that someone should feel that threatened by medical evidence and truth about, a life-saving intervention for babies. So so that's kind of what we're dealing with. So we go to conferences when we can, medical conferences and others. And then, through kind of social media campaigns, doing interviews, media interviews, things like that, getting our name out there, and really just trying. And then our annual conference that we have, our medical education conference, we advertise that and invite people to come to that to learn more about the organization, as well as to be able to get continuing education credits.
So if I can just confirm one thing I heard you say, Dr. Francis, is you said that the AAPLOG conference kicked you out for having a view that has been in the oath, the Hippocratic oath that doctors have been taking for like 3,000 years. You were kicked out for basically saying, I agree with the Hippocratic oath.
Exactly.
Wow.
Exactly. Yeah. It kind of shows you unfortunately, where healthcare has gone. And honestly, now medical students, when they're starting medical school, most of them are not even taking any kind of oath. It kind of moved from the traditional Hippocratic oath to a revised oath that worked in a lot of social justice language, took out the language about not performing abortions, not ending people's life at the end of life, no assisted suicide, things like that. And replaced it with more kind of social justice, patient autonomy kind of language. And now it's gone to the point where most of them are not even taking any kind of oath, which I think is terrifying, actually.
Yeah, terrifying.
I don't want to see a physician that has not taken an oath to put my best interests from a health perspective as sort of the guiding factor for what they are going to do and recommend. And so, what is the moral guidance and that steering rudder for physicians now, because we are in a place of significant power in that relationship with patients, and with that needs to come a very healthy respect for the potential for damage that we have as well if we aren't guided by a very clear guiding star, that guides our actions and our recommendations. And so that's a real problem in medicine right now.
Mm-hmm. And how do you recommend patients and families find a pro-life doctor? Is it on your website, or do they ask their doctor directly, or how do you even find, someone who's not pro-abortion right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's a number of different ways. One, we do have a directory on our website. Our members are only listed there if they've agreed to be listed. We've committed to our members that we won't release their information if they don't give us permission to. So sometimes people will call us and say, well, I looked at your directory and I couldn't find anyone in my state. So that does happen sometimes, but our directory is a great place to start. It's actually undergoing some much needed updates. And so I think the new version will be out relatively soon. But that's one way. Another way would be, there's a lot of other groups of physicians out there that if you can't find one on our website, Christian Medical and Dental Association or the Catholic Medical Association. If you find one of their doctors, they're very likely to be pro-life. Not a guarantee, certainly, but they're very, very likely to be pro-life. So that's when there's another group called My Catholic Doctor that can be a good way of trying to find a pro-life doctor in your area as well. And then I always encourage patients to ask their physicians about it and just say, and you can do it in a very non-threatening way. One good way I think is to say, let's say I got an adverse diagnosis for my baby. What would be your initial recommendation? What sort of support do you provide for patients? And then if they say, I recommend abortion, then there's your answer. Now, I will say many physicians, even who are pro-life, feel because of their training that they have to refer for abortion if that's what the patient wants. And so you may hear a doctor sort of hedge that a little bit, even if they really don't want the patient to choose that and they actually are pro-life. But I think, questions like that, or, what is your position on, you could ask like elective abortion, that might be a good sort of clarifying question to ask your physician. So I think it's actually a great conversation for patients to have with their physician. And I think most physicians are not going to be offended by it and might be kind of surprised that somebody's asking them. But I think that's good because it challenges them to think about their position as well.
And it's also better to ask those questions before you're in a situation where you're maybe faced with that, right? Like if you're pregnant and then you do have some sort of adverse diagnosis and then your doctor's recommending something you wouldn't ever want to do,
Yeah, exactly.
So definitely good to ask those questions. So Dr. Francis, I know we don't have a ton of time yet, but left. But I wanted to kind of switch gears a little bit and just I know you recently did an investigation into chemical abortion pills and ordering them. Could you tell our listeners a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it was shocking even for us, to be honest, when we finished. So we wanted to see. There's been, of course, a lot of videos that have shown how easy abortion pills are to obtain online. Lots of people have posted on social media that men were just able to get them, or women who are well past their childbearing years, were able to get them, things like that. But there had never been a physician that had gone on and looked, purely from a medical standpoint. Are there any guardrails at all on these websites? At any point, if somebody was just so high risk from a medical standpoint for taking these drugs, would they put a stop to it and say, we're sorry, we can't send you these pills? So I was really interested to know. And I figured at some point there would be a stop, and so we we went through the Plan C website, which is essentially like a clearinghouse website. And I put in that I live in Indiana, which I do, where abortion is almost completely illegal. And then they popped up, I think it was 17 different websites that I could go to in the state of Indiana to get my hands on these pills. So I chose Aid Access because that's one of the biggest distributors of these pills. And so I chose them because I thought, out of all of them, they maybe have the biggest chance of being, responsible because they're sort of a well-established organization. And so that's why we chose Aid Access. And they did ask a lot of questions, but the problem was there was never a stop. So in the end, I was a 13-year-old girl, no proof of, no identification required. I was a 13-year-old girl with an IUD in place, a history of an ectopic pregnancy, 3 prior C-sections, on blood thinners, also anemic, unsure of how far along I was, and no ultrasound to confirm my gestational age. And I was able to get the pills. So in the end,
pro-life state too, right? In Indiana,
which
is a pro-life state.
So they would pop up little warnings, as I put in, that I had a history of an ectopic pregnancy or that I had an IUD in place. They would pop up a warning that would say, you may be at an increased risk of this being an ectopic pregnancy. We recommend you get an ultrasound. But all you had to do was click, I acknowledge the risk, and you can keep going. So there's a problem there for 2 reasons. One, it would be irresponsible of me as a physician, even if the patient was like, I'm willing to take the risk. Will you still just give me this dangerous drug? It would be completely irresponsible of me to say, okay, as long as you're willing to acknowledge the risk, yes, I'll give it to you. No, I can't do that when I know that it's going to be harmful for my patient. So that's not happening. But also, how is a 13-year-old girl supposed to sufficiently understand the true risk that she's placing herself at? She's 13.
Mhm.
Also, no screening for sexual abuse. You know, as physicians, we're mandatory reporters. If I have a 13-year-old pregnant girl in my office, my first thought is going to be, was she abused? And if she was, I'm a mandatory reporter of that abuse so that I can get her out of that abusive situation. So, and of course, that was not happening. Then when I got to the end and went to submit my request, it said that my information would be reviewed by a healthcare professional, and that if I was approved, then I would get an email with a payment link and to confirm my mailing address. Well, once I hit submit, literally a minute and a half later, I had an email in my inbox with the payment link and to confirm my mailing address. So obviously it was an automatically generated email. You know,
Wow.
I mean, it showed up a minute and a half later.
Wow. It was just
So
probably they just
at one
probably
point
put
does
that
that,
there. Yeah, go
well,
ahead.
when does
Jason.
that cross into medical malpractice?
Well,
Sorry, Jessica.
absolutely. It's 100% medical malpractice. The problem is when I got the drugs, so 4 days later, they showed up in my mailbox in Indiana. No prescriber information whatsoever, and just a random address in Los Angeles. And when we looked up the address, it is just like kind of this rundown looking building with no business name attached to the address. So who do I charge with medical? Like, who's being held liable?
Wow.
You know, there's nobody to hold liable. They told me if I had problems, I should go to the emergency room, and I could just lie and tell them that I was having a miscarriage. And, you know, so who do I go to? The other thing is that states like California have shield laws that shield it. Even if I did have prescriber information, their shield law would have protected that doctor from any kind of medical malpractice suit or criminal suit or, you know, anything like that. So this, I'm glad you brought that up, Jason, because this really truly is medical malpractice.
Mhm.
We would never do this in any other area of medicine. And I actually think it's really demeaning to women that are seeking abortions, you know, who oftentimes we all know this. Oftentimes women in that situation are in very difficult circumstances. Oftentimes they're coming from lower socioeconomic conditions, and they're feeling pressured. I think it's really demeaning to these women to say to them, you don't deserve the same level of care that any other woman seeking medical care deserves. We are fine with this substandard level of care, below substandard level of care for you because you want an abortion. So it's totally fine to give you these drugs that legitimately could kill you because you're seeking an abortion, when we wouldn't do that in any other, you know, arena of medicine.
Yeah.
It's why I don't understand why feminist groups aren't up in arms over this, honestly, because not only are women being actively harmed, but then the doctors that are doing it are being shielded from any sort of responsibility.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like there's almost no doctor involved because,
Right.
I mean, the pro-abortion side would say, oh, abortion is a choice between involving a woman and her doctor. And this is just, well, it seems like it's just no doctor, just
Right.
um,
No,
Woman
this
and
is
her
not.
her
This
web
is not
form.
between a woman and her doctor. It's between a woman or a girl and a shopping website. Is essentially what this is.
yeah. So
Yeah.
so do you think it's like there's nothing you could possibly say that they won't sell you those abortion pills? Like nothing will stop them from selling them to you, like anybody, really?
Yeah. I mean, not that we could. I can't imagine what else I could have put
Yeah,
in
I
there.
mean, you had some pretty crazy circumstances for that girl.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. Absolutely.
three C-sections at 13, like.
At 13, I know.
Yeah.
Like, actually, when we finished filming, my colleague and I looked at each other. We're like, there's no way this is going to get through. Like, somebody's going to look at this and say, this is insane. Somebody's messing with us, you know? I mean, we even were like, this is outrageous. The information that we just put in is completely outrageous. Surely they're not going to send it. And they did. So I think that just shows they don't care. They don't actually care about women's health. They're asking those questions purely because they want to try to cover their own butts and say that they asked them. but they obviously don't care about the answers. If they did, then there would have been at the very least hey, we're going to have somebody call you and talk through this before we send you the pills. Even that would have been better than what is happening.
Yeah.
But it's not happening. And it's why in our video and then our full investigative report, which I'll refer people to, the website that we have for the investigation, because there's a lot more information there, is AAPLOG, AAPLOG.org/investigation. But it's why we say in there, these should not be referred to as telehealth or telemedicine abortions. That is not what's happening. There is no involvement by a medical professional in this process. And so this is purely online shopping, mail order abortions with no medical oversight. And if someone wants to defend that, then they can work on defending that, but they shouldn't defend it by saying this is telehealth or telemedicine, because that absolutely is not what's going on.
Yeah. Are people able to buy other drugs as easily online without like any prescription, or just for abortion pills?
Well, I'm not aware of any that they can get with legally anyways, with no interaction with a medical professional. You certainly can be prescribed things via telehealth or telemedicine, but there's an interaction with a medical professional that has prescribing authority in that case. So if there's a problem, you have a person to go back to talk about your issues, or talk about the complication that occurred or whatever. I am not aware of any other, especially a high-risk drug that still has a black box warning attached to it, that is available online. One of the other websites we went to, we didn't show this in the video, but literally was like Amazon. Like, you looked at different pill packs, you chose which one you want, you put it in your cart, and you paid, and you would get it. I didn't pay for that one because I didn't want to give people, the abortion industry, any more of my money than I already had. But it literally was like a shopping, just an Amazon shopping. So there was no questions asked at all. And so, so there's even that availability too. So,
yeah, I wonder if like with fighting like the pornography industry, you go after the credit card companies and say,
right.
you can't authorize this because there could be, sexual abuse and,
Right.
exploitation. So I wonder if, if we go to the credit card companies and say, don't allow these transactions, there could be, it's criminal, it's unsafe, it's, illegal, it's harming. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think the first step that needs to happen is the FDA needs to at a minimum, they need to reinstate the in-person dispensing requirement. Once that's reinstated, then I think going after, like you said, maybe the payment companies, the platforms that are hosting these websites, things like that, because they are aiding and abetting criminal activity. The Louisiana case that's working its way through the courts right now, where Louisiana is suing the FDA because this online dispensing is negating Louisiana and states like Indiana. It's negating our pro-life laws, that we worked very hard to get passed, and they're essentially moot right now because of the availability of the abortion drug. And so, it went to the Supreme Court on a emergency preliminary injunction basis. And unfortunately, the Supreme Court stayed the Fifth Circuit's decision, which would have reinstated the in-person dispensing requirement. But in their dissent to that decision at the Supreme Court, my favorite justices, Alito and Thomas, their opinions were actually amazing. And both of them, I can't remember who it was that said it in such a funny way. It was probably Justice Thomas, just basically said, we have no responsibility and no duty to uphold criminal activity. And what these companies, these pill companies are engaging in is criminal activity.
Yeah.
And so we don't have any responsibility to defend their rights to participate in criminal activity. And that is exactly what's happening. So, so I'll put that out too to your listeners, to please be in prayer for that case is being heard again at the Fifth Circuit. So full oral arguments and all of that on September 9th. So that's coming up. Our good friends at Alliance Defending Freedom are involved in that case, as well as the amazing attorneys with the state of Louisiana will be arguing on the merits in front of the Fifth Circuit on September 9th. And so out of that, potentially we could, hopefully they would issue their same decision that they did before, which is that while this continues, the full sort of evidentiary process through the court system, that because of the ongoing harm to women like Rosalie Marquezich in Louisiana, whose boyfriend ordered the pills under her name and then under threat of physical violence sat there and forced her to take them, even though she didn't want them, and lost her child that she desperately wanted, because the risk of ongoing harm to women like Rosalie is so significant that the FDA should immediately reinstate the in-person dispensing requirement. So that is certainly our hope. It wouldn't go far enough. Certainly, there's a lot more that would need to be done, but it would go a long way in helping protect preborn children as well as helping protect women. I feel like almost every week we hear another story of an abuser forcing these pills on a woman who didn't want the abortion. There was the one in Ohio recently that was in the news of a physician, actually, which I think is even more abhorrent, ordering them and literally holding his girlfriend's mouth open and shoving the pills down her mouth. That wouldn't be possible if these drugs required an in-person visit before they were given out. So everybody should be having close eyes on the Fifth Circuit on September 9th. And then I don't know how long it'll take for their decision to come out, but that's when oral arguments will happen.
Yeah, we'll definitely be praying. And yeah, we just encourage all of our listeners, please pray. This is really, really, really important. And yeah, Dr. Francis, thank you so much. Thank you for everything that you're doing at AAPLOG. It's amazing. And yeah, we're just really grateful for the work that you're doing and the fact that, you're shedding light on this, how easy it is to order these pills. Like this is the new, really the devil's new method in the pro-life movement is these chemical abortion pills. And yeah, it's terrible. So yeah, we just encourage everyone to pray and thank you. Thank you so much for everything that you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys so much, for having me on to talk about this. And also thank you and all of your listeners who continue to advocate for life in very tough places. I consider myself very blessed that I live in Indiana, which is a state that respects life, and am so thankful for our law that we do have whenever it's able to be fully enforced, hopefully soon if these drugs can't be dispensed through the mail anymore. But I know that it is very difficult to keep up your energy and your passion and things like that in tough states like New Hampshire and like many New England states where so much of your state government and all of that are against you in this. So I just encourage your listeners, and I know you wanted me to bring a Bible verse, and I think this goes very well with encouraging your listeners, because this really, a mentor of mine that really kind of helped bring me into the pro-life movement, always says this verse or reads these verses when he's talking about the life issue. And it really has become my motivator. So it's Proverbs 31 verses 8 and 9. And it says, "Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. Speak up and judge fairly, defend the rights of the poor and needy." And, that is just such an encouragement to me, because of course, preborn children rely upon us to be their voice. They don't have their own voice in the womb. But I also think of the moms and the girls and the families who feel pressured oftentimes into an abortion decision. I think oftentimes they might feel like they don't have a voice either. And so, we really need to empower them to use their voices and to make healthy choices, and then also speak up for their children. So that will be my encouragement for all of us today.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Francis. Again, thank you for coming on. And it's always such a pleasure to talk to you and hear about all the great things that AAPLOG is doing. So
Thanks so much for having me. It was great being with you.
So thank you. Have a great weekend.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you, Dr. Francis.
Thank you.
That's our show, everyone. We'll see you next week. Be ever living.
Thank you for listening to the Ever Living podcast, a podcast by New Hampshire Right-to-Life, New Hampshire's oldest and most active pro-life organization. You can learn more about our work
and learn how to get involved at www.nhrtl.org. If you would like to donate to our mission, you can make a donation at www.nhrtl.org/donate. See you next week. May God bless you and be very near to you, and may you be ever living.